Does the idea of hot tenting intrigue you, but yet you don't want to break the bank? I'm going to show you a great entry-level hot tent, stove, and other gear that you may need, and you can get into hot tenting for under 400 bucks. All right, so I was opposed to hot tenting a few years ago, and I documented the reasons for not liking hot tenting in a video. Hot tents suck, Mr. Rob.
I'm curious.
Change my mind.
I'm curious. Do you have a license to be out here to talk about these things, or are you just here trying to stir up drama? Like, what's your actual point here? What do you actually know about hot tents to form the opinion that they suck?
Hot tents are very heavy. They're a lot of work.
Heavy compared to what?
They're for wusses.
For what?
That video really got some of you hot tent guys all riled up. Y'all need to sit down, relax. It's just for fun. It's just a video. Everybody be cool. So a few of my friends really got into hot tenting. I had a chance to try it. I had a chance to taste the hot tent life. I finally broke down and I decided I was going to try hot tenting, but I wasn't 100% in, so I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money. I reached out to my friend Justin at the YouTube channel It's Good in the Woods, and he recommended that I talk to Three Ridges Gear Company, who is the American distributor for Luxe tents. Now, I had been to a couple of hot tent things where I did see the Mini Peak XL from Luxe at a hot tenting event, and I thought that might be a good tent for me. Full disclosure, when I reached out to Three Ridges Gear Company, I am a YouTuber, so I offered to do a couple of videos instead of paying cash for the gear. And they agreed to it. However, the terms were, I don't have to do a positive review or say good things about the products. I just have to show them in a video. So I did those videos about a year ago. I am no way being paid for this video or obligated to do it. However, I wanted to share with you some of this gear is a good option if you kind of are half in and half out on hot tenting and you want to try to get into it for a low cost. There are some bigger and nicer hot tents and stoves that I'm going to talk about in this video. However, those tents can start at $2,000 and stoves can be over $1,000. So it's very expensive. So in this video, I'm giving you recommendations on low-cost ways to get into hot tenting. Hot tenting can be different from one person to the other. There are many different conditions for hot tenting. Some people will haul their hot tent out to remote locations and camp in Arctic conditions with temperatures as low as -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people may go hot tenting next to their car, and some people, cold for them may be 30 to 50 degrees above zero. Some people go hot tenting alone and others do it in a group. Some people may sleep in a hot tent all winter while others are only going out for a night or two, or they're actually on a trek where they're camping one night here and they keep on moving to a new site and move and keep on tearing down and setting up the next day. All of these different varieties of hot tenting will affect the type of hot tenting gear that you should own. My recommendations are probably best for the solo camper who is an average hiker, who is going to be camping in sub-freezing temperatures, probably alone and probably not next to their car, and they're probably not going to be out for a super long time, maybe 1 or 2 nights, at most maybe a week. Let's start with the tent. I recommend the Luxe Mini Peak Pro XL hot tent. Now they do sell this tent as a 4-season tent where it comes with an inner tent with a bug net. I only use this tent in the winter when it's cold out and you don't have to worry about bugs. So I recommend that you purchase the Mini Peak Pro XL without the inner tent and bug net, because I find, you don't have to worry about bugs, and that inner tent and bug net actually get in the way and take up space inside of your hot tent. So by doing this and getting the version without that inner tent, you can save some money. The tent without that right now is $189, which is $89 less than the 4-season tent. Now, that 4-season tent, obviously you could use that in warmer temperatures as well. However, I find that that tent is pretty heavy and doesn't compact down real good for backpacking in the other 3 seasons. This tent does come with a stove jack, which is the special material that has a hole going through it for your stovepipe to go up through the tent without melting your tent. It also has a snow skirt that goes around the perimeter of your tent. Now, without that 4-season inner tent, this tent will not have a floor to it. In fact, most hot tents don't have floors. And realistically, only one full-size adult is going to fit in this tent when you have the stove inside. Now, Three Ridges Gear Company does sell the Luxe Twin Shelter for $259. The $189 for the Mini Peak Pro XL tent does not include the center pole. Now, you can use a trekking pole or you can find a stick out at site, but I highly recommend that you buy the adjustable pole that Three Ridges Gear Company sells for an additional $38. Since there is no floor, you'll probably want a tarp to stay dry and clean. Now, you can go out and just get a cheap tarp. However, I recommend that you get the Solo Footprint for $36. It is exactly the right size for one person. It straps out to your stakes, which keeps it tight. It keeps it in the right place. And it also has a 3 or 4 inch lip going around that helps if you have little pieces of gear. It helps keep it on your tarp. It helps keep that dirt and moisture out. It's also much more durable than a cheap tarp and packs down much smaller. Let's talk stoves. This is where it can get a bit complicated. There are all sorts of sizes, materials, different people selling them, different people making them, and it can get really confusing. Now, most hot tent stoves do burn wood. The propane stoves usually do not have a stovepipe and do not vent to the outside, which makes it very dangerous due to carbon monoxide. Most wood stoves for a hot tent are constructed out of steel or a lightweight titanium. Now, some stoves collapse all the way down, so they're super compact while you're hiking in. However, you have to assemble the whole thing once you get to camp. There are other varieties where it is only semi-constructed at camp, which means that it's bigger and a little bit harder to haul in, but it's a little bit easier to set up once you get to camp. All of these stoves come with a stovepipe, which is basically the chimney to get the smoke from your stove to outside. There are a couple different types of stovepipes. The first is a sheet of metal that you have to roll once you get to the campsite, and you put rings around it, and that forms your chimney. The other type are where the stovepipe comes in sections and you just attach one section to the next. Now, the section option is a lot easier than the rolled option. However, those section pipes do take up a lot of space for hauling your gear out to your campsite. Now, that rolled option is what I have been using. It is actually the smaller option, but it can be difficult. That sheet of metal comes rolled, and it's probably about a foot long, and it's 6 to 8 feet long. So you have to unroll it and then get it to roll the opposite direction to form, that 6 to 8 foot long pipe. And you need to do this the first couple of times at home before you go camping. I used a PVC pipe to roll it around, and you put it on your stove and you burn it in, which means that you run your stove at a high temperature, and it heats up that pipe, and it flexes and it does all sorts of things. And then when you roll it back up and you roll it back out at camp, it's going to remember that shape of being 6 to 8 feet long and rolled that opposite direction, so it makes it a lot easier. If you plan to buy a small hot tent like the Mini Peak Pro XL, you just need a small wood stove. So these are the two wood stoves that Three Ridges Gear Company sells, both the stainless steel version and the titanium version. Neither one of these stoves are perfect. There are some flaws with each one of them. Let's look at each one, and I'll tell you a little bit more about their strengths and some of their weaknesses. The 3RG titanium wood stove costs $369 and another $38 for the optional snow and sand plate. It weighs under 5 pounds with that snow and sand plate. The dimensions are, the stove body is 13.5 inches long by 7 5/8 inches wide by 6 5/8 inches tall. It has adjustable legs. It has a reinforced top plate. The stovepipe is 8 feet long by 2.5 inches. Now this is the first stove that I had, and it packs down real nice into this small little bag. However, I have found that this stove is very difficult to assemble. So if you look on here, in each of the 4 corners, there's this long leg, which is this bolt that runs all the way from the bottom all the way up through the stove, and you'll see that there is a little nut here on the top. So these little nuts and these little wing nuts on here all have to be assembled when you are out at camp, which can be kind of awkward, especially when you're out in the snow and out in the dirt and out in the sand. And I have a problem with my fingers going numb and that dexterity. So it can be very difficult, and the possibility of losing one of these nuts while you're out there is very high. You will see on this one, I do have the optional snow and sand plate here on the bottom. I highly do recommend that because it helps keep your stove level out there, as well as it protects your tarp underneath, and it just makes everything a whole lot sturdier when you're out there. New this year is the mini stainless tent stove, which costs $199. It weighs 7.5 pounds. It packs a little bit bigger, and it weighs 3 pounds more than the titanium stove. It's constructed of 11 millimeter 304 stainless. The dimensions of the stove body are 12 inches long by 7.5 inches wide by 6 inches tall. So it is quite a bit smaller than the titanium stove. This one comes with a 6 or 8 foot stove pipe. This one comes with a false bottom, which I really like because it's super helpful when you're trying to light your fire and get that fire going. It also has some vents along the top on the sides of the stove that are meant to be opened so you can get your fire to burn hotter. I was super excited when this stove came out because the design seems to be a lot better. You can see here the legs simply fold out. You don't have to attach them. Also, the front, the sides, the back, all of the walls are attached, and they simply fold out. You put the top on, and the sides are held together by these little pieces that turn. You turn these little pieces and it holds the top on. So it has a great design. So stainless steel makes it much cheaper. It has a better design, but the drawbacks of stainless steel are, first of all, it weighs about 3 pounds more than that one. This design, the flute here and the pipe on the top here, this stays attached, so the bag is a little bit bigger. but the stainless steel also warps when it gets hot. So that warping, you can see I've used this one quite a bit. It's kind of dirty and discolored. But that warping actually, you know, it makes the metal bend. And when you are trying to assemble it, you know, it has some issues. You can see that it has these pieces that turn. And each of those are attached with a little bolt, and they give you an Allen wrench. And that Allen wrench, you can tighten and loosen these bolts. And with that warping, I've found that, well, you can see on this one, you know, if I do it that way, you know, it's kind of loose. And on this one, it's kind of tight. So it makes it a little bit difficult to get these on there. So you can adjust those with that Allen wrench. And I mentioned earlier that there's a vent along the top of the stove. And with that warping, I have a hard time, see it's coming apart. I have a hard time getting that to open and to close with that warping. And so I just left them open. Optimally, you'd leave them closed, but it was already open. It didn't cause any problems. You know, there wasn't any smoke coming out in my tent. However, my fire did burn just a little bit hotter. The other flaw with the design of this stove is the legs are quite short. The clearance compared to the titanium stove, it's probably about 2 inches shorter. You probably have, I don't know, 3 to 4 inches underneath your stove. So you cannot put this stove right on top of a tarp or else it'll melt that tarp. You know, the easy fix is you get a couple pieces of your firewood and you put them underneath the legs and it will raise your stove up. Three Ridges Gear Company also sells a fire retardant, heat resistant blanket for $19 that you can put underneath. And I actually bought some steel conduit, cut it into pieces, and you can see I have some hose clamps on here. And I made some legs that increased it so it has about a 15-inch clearance on the bottom. I'm going to continue to use the stainless stove with the modification that I made to it, just because I like that it's a lot easier to assemble, even with the warping, once I get out to camp. So I've talked with Jim at Three Ridges Gear Company, and he kind of knows what the flaws are of each of these stoves. And he'd like to make a stove that we think is even better than these stoves. And he wants some feedback of what exactly that stove would have on it that would make you want to buy it. So for me, I think that this design is great with the legs that fold out, the sides and the front that fold out. You have the pieces that turn, so you attach it and everything's connected there. You don't have to worry about losing nuts, and you don't have to worry about, you know, screwing the little nuts on when you don't have finger dexterity. What can make this even better is get rid of those vents along the side. Either make it in titanium, however that might be cost prohibitive. So reinforce that steel. Make it so it doesn't warp if that's possible. Make the legs a little bit longer and keep that false bottom. I really like that false bottom. When I go hot tenting, usually there's snow on the ground, so I'm hoping to be pulling my gear in a pulk or a sled behind me and not in a backpack, so that extra weight isn't a big deal. You know, maybe you're backpacking and having titanium and making it cost a lot more is more important to you. So let's go over how much at a minimum it's going to cost you to get into hot tenting. The two things that you need to buy at a minimum are your hot tent, which is $189, and the stove, which is $199. Now, there are some other things that you probably need to buy, but they are optional. First, I talked about that center pole and the footprint, which add another $74. Some other things that you'll probably want are a carbon monoxide detector, lines to stabilize your stove vent, maybe that heat-resistant blanket or a second tarp, cold weather sleeping bag and a sleeping mat, an axe, a hatchet, or a saw, and other various small items and food. These stoves only burn for 30 to 60 minutes, so it's not possible to burn the stove and stay warm and to sleep at night. So you should plan a sleeping bag and a sleeping mat that are warm enough for the conditions that you are sleeping in when it is cold out. So if you don't have a cold weather sleeping bag, try taking 2 warmer weather sleeping bags and putting one inside of the other, and you should get that insulation loft to keep you warm. However, those warm sleeping pads probably aren't going to be enough to keep your bottom side cold, so you probably should upgrade that. The other thing that you should also think about is firewood. Even if you are buying bundles of firewood, these stoves are too short for that wood, so you will have to at least cut those pieces in half, and most likely you're going to have to split them to be smaller to burn inside of your stove. Now that I've been successful at hot tenting and I found that I really enjoy it, I'm actually going to upgrade my gear. I'm going to get one of those fancy canvas hot tents that are big, a big stove. However, that's honestly going to cost thousands of dollars. So help me out a little bit. If you're planning on buying a tent from Three Ridges Gear Company, that Mini Peak Pro XL, or one of these stoves or that other gear, use the affiliate link that is in the description of this video, and that will give me a small commission. It doesn't add on to the price of your gear, and it helps me out a little bit so I can buy that new hot tent. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Punch the bell notification. Check out Midwest Backpacker on Instagram and Facebook. Hey, don't wait for the warm temperatures, but stay warm while you're camping. Try out hot tenting, and we will see you out on the trail.